Is there something on screen? There is. Hello. My name's Andy Needham. I'm a freelance senior motion designer based in London. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you for turning out. Thanks for everyone watching online as well. Hopefully, if you caught part one, this will be a continuation to that. And if you didn't, it will be available soon on the Maxon YouTube channel, along with part two, which is going to be now. But before we get into that, just a little bit about me. I am a digital artist as well, and an educator. Been teaching for over 9 years, mainly on LinkedIn Learning, which was lynda.com back in the day. And you'll see, you can find some of my other courses on Grayscale Gorilla Plus and School of Motion. Amazing platforms, and there's always something to learn. And that's kind of like the pleasure of doing a presentation like this. It's been a way of doing a bit more research and a deeper dive into a topic. Yeah, that's partly why I love to teach, because I also love to learn the subject as well. And so before we dive in, I'm going to show my current reel, and then we'll get into it. There's a lot to cover. Any sound? All right, so creating cloud assets in Cinema 4D. Again, this is a two-part thing, so just to recap on part one, which you can find on the YouTube channel. It was just covering the basics of getting some geometry in, and then refining that with deformers, and then further with fields in the volume builder, rendering it out with the volume material and Redshift. And in this part, we're actually going to get into more the simulation side. So I guess if you have a bit more time, the other part was a bit more kind of like immediate, maybe more for artistic purposes. But with this simulation, you definitely need to have the time and patience to kind of allow the simulation to kind of to help you get the result you're looking for. But we're going to dive into Pyro, and I'm going to talk a bit about capsules as well. And how we can build our own generator in Cinema 4D. And we'll try and combine a few of these elements as well. If we have time, we'll get into combining Pyro with particles and other things as well. So yeah, I'm going to answer or try and answer a few questions. The first one being, is the source geo important? Because we had previously a proper fully fledged form. Let's just see if we can do it with something a bit more simple. And we'll go into Cinema 4D. And what I'm going to do is just come into my top view. Because what I want to do is just draw out like the footprint of the cloud. And we're going to do that just by using a spline. So we can come over here, and I'm going to sketch one out really rough. Not too fussed about it. And let's just get some rough shape, right? And I'm going to stop it there, because I'm going to then come over to the spline and close it. If we look at the points here, when I was a bit slow with the pen, we got quite a high concentration of points. And as I was fast, it was like, moving around. So I may want to kind of, smooth this out. And I don't want to have to spend the time pushing and pulling these points. So handy feature, not a feature, but a plugin from Rocket Lasso is these utility splines. And if you've used, we'll come back to capsules later, but some of the amazing capsules that are included in Cinema 4D are developed by Rocket Lasso. So these utility splines allow you to clean up, reduce, resample, smooth out the geometry or the spline that's fed into it. So with the smooth, I can just kind of increase the iterations here and smooth out the look of this. So I think I'll keep that for now. And the other good thing is you can obviously change your mind. Maybe you want to clean it up first, and then come back in and stack another one on top. So we could clean up, then we could smooth. Maybe I'll just smooth that out a little bit more. Just so, yeah, a lovely way of working with splines. Super powerful. And from here, I'm going to give this a mesh. So I'm going to come in and add a spline mask and just come over here to create cap. So if we press NB or come over to our display options and we're just displaying the lines here, this looks pretty terrible. I want to kind of even out the surface. So I can do that with a remesh. And then now we have a lovely even mesh on top here. And what we can do then is use this with Pyro. And let's just see, we'll add a simulation tag, and we'll add a Pyro emitter. And it's looking at the surface, which is important for this because it's just a flat surface. It doesn't have any volume, so we couldn't use that. But we could potentially use points, a new option. But I'm going to stick it on surface for now. And let's just change our view a little bit so we can then rewind and press play. And immediately we're going to get a result. So it's super fast. It's calculated on the GPU. So yeah, looking all right, but it's looking a bit not like a cloud. So I'm going to come into the display options. And my pen doesn't seem to be working, so I'm going to have to use my mouse. Right, so I will come down here. And I only want to see the density in the viewport. And I'm not too fussed about the bounding box. I think that's a little bit distracting, so we can turn that off too. So yeah, looking all right. But as I mentioned, you may want to, the shape of this, we can control this and say where exactly we want the majority of the emission to be. And we can do that very intuitively with vertex maps. So on the remesh, and I'm going to rewind this just so we can see the geo. So we see the surface there. In other tags, we'll add a vertex map. And now this has a value of 0. So we want to add some data to this, which we're then going to feed into the Pyro emitter tag. I'm going to do that first with a linear field. So I'll add one to here. And just, I'm in my spline pen still, so I'm going to just press E. So with the linear field, let's just increase the size. So we're encompassing the whole lot here. About 300 units is fine. All right, so this is cool. Let's just show the effect. And I'm going to drag this into the emission map. And this will take vertex maps, vertex color, or selections. I'm going to just rewind and play. And you'll see now where the values were strongest, more yellow, we now have more emission happening on that side. So just as we sculpted the base of the spline, base of the cloud with a spline, we can actually now use another spline to remap this value and say, oh yeah, well, maybe I want more in the middle and a little bump here and all this kind of stuff, so we can really get that shape. So we can come into the linear field, and in the remapping, instead of this linear curve, not curve, but linear amount, we can come into the contour and change that to curve, and immediately you'll see that we get a slight little curve here. What we can do is come down to here, and if it's hard to see, I'll open it in a separate window, so we can just see what we're working with here. Make this a bit bigger for us. And yeah, it's kind of nice to see the vertex map side by side. So let's just click onto that, and we can kind of see what's going on. Now, if I bring this over and click down, I'm reducing the values, so I can start to play around with this, and I could add more points to this if needs be. But what I'm going to do is just going to maybe weight this maybe towards this side, And so we now have that is our emission. So the value is most strong up here at the top. And just to kind of make that transition a bit more less harsh, we can then layer up another field. Let's just come into the fields list of the vertex map, and we'll just add a random field. And that's a bit too strong. I'm going to set this just to overlay. And what I want to do is come in to the blending. You could do this here with the slider or in the blending tab, and we can just blend this back just a touch, a little touch. And what I'm looking for is just around here, it's breaking it up with that noise. If we had a more detailed mesh, say if we remesh this more, you'd sort of have more, the vertex map would have more information to play with, and you'd then start to see that noise pattern. But it's not necessarily really, because I'll just reduce this back down. Okay, so for now, we'll just stick with that. And I think I'll hide these fields from view just so we're focusing more on this. And then we'll rewind and press play. And again, now we're seeing a bit more of that cloud just come out there, and we're starting to really design the shape, and it's looking way more cloud-like now. So this is looking decent. I'm quite happy with that. And we need, so we have our density, because we don't have the volume, we were actually just working on a surface. We need temperature, we need to push it all up. I'm actually I didn't expect it to look like this at this point. So this is the other thing about simulations. It's going to be different every single time. So I was thinking, I'm going to have to try this and this and this to really, get the detail out. But the other thing is, the voxel count, the voxel size is pretty low, right? It's looking quite blocky. And if I were to change this, really reduce it down, the issue that we'll have is it can sometimes become a bit more, obviously it's way more detailed, but it can become a little bit more hard to, you've spent your time designing it at a certain level, and then you introduce all this additional data, and then suddenly it can look completely different, especially if you've got more fuel and forces involved and things like that. So a way to get around that is to just set your voxel size back. Once you're sort of happy with the look and feel of this, you could say you could start to work with the cache. So we'll come into our cache tab here, and actually I just want to check. We're not really interested in outputting any temperature, so we'll keep the density on. And let's just cache this scene. So I'm going to put it into my cache folder. Oh, it looks like I've got something in there already. So it doesn't matter. I'll just make a new one. So this is just going to go through and cache those 90 frames. And if, that looks like quite a lot. So at a certain point, it's not going to do what I want it to do. So I can now scrub the timeline and actually say, well, actually, around 65, that's probably as much as I'd ever want it to be. So maybe I'll dial it back to maybe 45. I'll set the range to 45. And what we can do is take this cache, and the way we get more detail in is by up-resing it. And so you can see at the bottom here is a voxel size of 5. That's what we had input in the Pyro object. By using our up-res factor of 2, that's going to reduce it by half. So then the result would be 2.5. So you could keep going with this, but I don't want to spend all time caching. So I will just activate. I'm going to cache the active cache. So up-res the active cache, which is this one here. So I'll up-res that. And I'll just put it in a separate folder, like so. And now that's going to go through and look at what we had cached there and add way more detail to it, while keeping the form that we've already designed. So we'll let that finish up, and it's going quite quickly. Again, it only has to do the range that I've set, so that's always quite useful as well. So if we just jump to the end here, and we can now see, if we just click over, just the difference in the look and feel. But it's really similar form, but now we have way more information to play with, and we can start to bring that out with the volume material and things like that. And on the note of caching, let's just turn off the cache for now, and just say we wanted to say we were happy with this at a certain point, and we wanted to actually then build on this a bit more. We could say, oh, we're going to set the initial state of this, like so. Just click it here. And now that frame 36 is going to be our start frame. So from here, it just starts and builds and builds and builds on that, right? So then, from there, you could then start to dial it back. And this is kind of, it'll allow me to, change a few of the settings for you. And you can see a way of what we could do is maybe to get that velocity under control a bit more by adding a bit of damping in the y-axis. So maybe 5, something like so. 5%, and we'll just see how that affects it. And you can see now that's a bit more under control. So, from just setting that initial state, you can then start to build on this further. So let's just, we can probably move on now from that, I think, and think about the next part of this. So what I'm going to do is, so yeah, I guess the source geo is what it is. It can be what it is. So it's just how you play with it and how you manipulate it. Right, can we automate this creation of the geo with capsules? Let's take a look at that. What I want to show is basically some input geo, and then we use nodes to add additional detail. And then that result can be fed into volumes. We could work with Pyro, all kinds of stuff. And this idea that I'm going to demonstrate is by no means like a finished product or anything like that. But it's more just to make this relatively new topic in terms of Cinema 4D, a bit more approachable, hopefully. So we'll dive into this, and we'll start here with just some basic geometry. Now I've just made some simple spheres and squished them down a little bit, and I've put them under a connect object. And the reason why they're in a connect is so that when I create my node, which is over here. So let's just start from the start. What you'd probably find your asset browser looking like this. You'd come over and switch it over to nodes, and then find the asset construction category. And then what we'll do is we'll add a nodes mesh into our scene like so. So this is, again, coming back to the point of it being under connect, is because what this is looking for, it's going to generate on the child object. So yeah, I want to have multiple objects. I put them under connect, and now they're suddenly seen as one object. So we'll put that underneath, and nothing happens. So we need to open up this nodes mesh in the nodes editor by double-clicking it. And I'm going to dock this underneath here, and we'll make this a little bit bigger. And this is like completely unknown territory, and I have to thank Noseman, Thanasis Bazansis, for a lot of his help and guidance on this. How do you even get the geometry to be an input, seen as an input? Okay, what you have to do is right-click and add an input. And you'd think, oh, I can just connect this up, and it will work, and I can do stuff with it. No. Okay, so there's a couple of stumbling blocks, and I think it's important that we demystify this a little bit, make it a bit more artist-friendly. So we can edit this port, and you could come in here, you could rename it, so it doesn't say input, it could say child. So it's expecting the child geometry. And we just need to set the port mode to be object, so it's expecting objects. And then we will right-click once more and add a nested port from the object bundle category here. And it's not looking for children, it's looking for geometry. So yeah, this is like one key step that is super important. But once you do that, and let's just zoom into our geometry here. Let's just zoom in a little bit. So once we do this, you'll see that it got the orange highlight got a little bit bolder. And to confirm that this is working and being seen by nodes now, we can hide this, it's still there. Or We could come in and make a node that works on geometry, like delete, and just drop that on the wire, and now it's deleted it. So we can work with this now. Okay, good start. Now, the other common thing that if you're using MoGraph and all that kind of stuff, you want to be able to clone geometry onto other geometry, right? So we're going to talk about how we do that. And the setup is, again, like not super artist friendly, but fortunately, once you know it, you can save it as a group and use it, reuse it. So let's add some voxels inside of this. So we'll do that with a volume voxel fill. So what this is looking for is the base geometry, the spheres that we have in the scene. And then this port here is a different color. It's not orange, so we can't directly connect it up to here. We need to then it's got a load of data inside it, and you can click onto this, and at the bottom corner here, you'll see it's an array of all kinds of values and things. We're interested in the matrix because we want to transform another piece of geometry onto this. So we're going to iterate through all this data and append it in a new array, build up our own array, and then output it to the scene. So I'm going to add an iterate collection. And once I do that, just connect them up, all that data from the volume voxel fill is passed over to this. And these elements are exactly what we had when we clicked on here. Okay? So the next thing to do is just to build an array. And all these terms are very sort of programmy and not very artist friendly at all, but it is what it is. Essentially, we just want to grab these objects, put them in another box, and then do something else with them. All right. So we are going to be working with geometry. So this is an array of geometry, and we can just remove all these inputs because we're going to start with something empty that we are then going to fill with the data coming from this side. So the only thing we need to do then is just to have another node that works through all of this and adds it to the collection. So we can quickly connect this up, and this one is great because you can see that just by connecting this up, the color changed. It's very smart. It kind of realized, oh, I'm now an array of geometry objects. But if you wanted to be explicit, you could come in here and change the value, to structure, array. And it's not array of float values, no. You would then replace that with geometry. Okay, it's exactly the same thing, but thankfully you don't need to know that, but now you do. Now we can come in and add a transform geo. And what are we actually going to transform? Well, we'll add, let's fill this with spheres. So we'll make a sphere. And I'm going to make this, it's quite large, but then that's not too bad because I don't want to fill, I'm trying to balance this out a little bit. Let's just see. Maybe just set this up around the same sort of size. So we'll just see. We can then play with the values a bit later. So I'm going to connect up the geometry that I want to put into the volume. And then we just need the matrix of this. And then these values get put into here. And then you close the loop off, like so. So this group here is basically what we're going to use to distribute geometry on objects, right? So, but the final step is we still have an array of things coming out here. And again, the icon's different. What we need to do is connect these into a single output. So I'm going to use a connect node. So we'll add that in. And if we drop this down, you can actually see that will just line up perfectly. Now this is seen, just as we had in the object manager, this is now like seen as one object that we can now connect to the output, and we get our voxels filled inside the volume here. So again, now it's a case of just playing with the size and balancing it out with what we have in here. You could randomize this a little bit, play with those values. So this section, let's just take this over here. So this is a really useful set of nodes that you can then group So we can right-click, we'll select them all and group them. And now this, we can say, or clone, am I spelling it right? Clone on geo, whatever, or distribute on the geo. Anyway, the point is that this is something that we can reuse again. So we could make a copy. We could take a copy of this, this sphere. We'll make the size a lot smaller. And if we say we wanted to add like a whole load of other bigger blobs on top of this, let's choose another distribution type so that we have surface scaled blue noise. And now the pane is gone. It is super simple just to say, all right, I'm going to connect this to this. I have my input geometry, which I connect here. And now a distribution to collection. And we can output that one. And we'll get something, once we play with the sizes, that's now more blobby and filling the volume like this, or on the surface of it, of the geometry. So yeah, play with the values, play with the seed. You could even like offset this a little bit. A lot of fun to play with. What about combining these things together, making it more complex? You guessed it, it's another array, okay? So we're going to build a brand new array. And this is another tip that Noseman taught me. Just connect this up, okay? You don't need this type of anymore. Now this array knows that it is looking for geometry objects because we put a geometry object kind of into it. We can remove two of the elements here. And then we'll say, I'll have you. And you're coming along for the ride. And then we can take another connect, because we want this DAO to be baked down to like one object. And we'll connect that up and take that out there. And now we have both in the scene. OK, so quite interesting. And quite kind of cloud-like. A lot of the time I was spending just putting loads and loads of spheres and kind of building up this volume. So now this is all done. What if we wanted the original geo back in there? We can just add to the array. So we could put the original back in, and that's there now, but it's kind of taking over the volume, the voxel fill. So yeah, we could put that maybe after at some point. It's just sort of looking at the flow of this and kind of seeing, where it could all go. But like, I feel like for now, this kind of gets that point across. You can always jump into a group by double-clicking it and make your changes, and then come back out. So the other thing actually is we could. This is another node that. Or another group of nodes that I've worked on just to displace the geometry. And you'll see that it looks a bit more kind of customized. It's got inputs here. It feels like a tool that we can use. If we dive in here, it's a bit more complex. It's a bit more out of the scope of what we're doing, but essentially we're kind of taking the points and iterating through them and the positions and normals and then just kind of pushing them in different directions and then putting it all back together. Just as a displace, it does. I'll copy this, and I'll bring it back into this asset that we're building here and paste it in. So this is something I can now reuse. Let's say we take our original geometry and just put that over to the scene here. And you can kind of see it's displacing the surface. It's probably not doing a great job because our underlying geometry doesn't have enough segments. So if we really bump that up, you can now start to see that's kind of blobbing things around, which is pretty cool. So we could say, hey, you know what? This type of geometry could be the input now for the voxel fill, but we'll also output it like this to the scene and just connect the last wire up. And now we have a real kind of blobby look again. So yeah, it can go pretty deep. Now, how do you make an input? Let's say, for example, we want to control the amount of fill that we have on this random thing here. So you can see this is what we're doing here. You just control or command click on the circle. And if we come down here, let me just remove I'll remove that for now. So I'll Command or Control click here, and now it becomes an available input that we could then drag over to this side and add it as a new input. And when you're clicking on top of the actual object, you can see we have that fill value available to us. We don't actually have to dive into the nodes at all. We can just adjust the value here. So this is how you would build up a UI for the tool. And if we come over to something that's maybe a bit more built out, this one's doing something similar, but again, slightly different because I've had some time to play with it further. But you get a lot of inputs on the side here. And again, not fully built out, but it's you have various controls here to start to manipulate this further. Then to have even further control and refinement, you'd then have to edit the resource and start to. In here, you can actually set up default values, min and max sliders, and all that kind of stuff, so you can have way more control. But we're not going to get into that, I don't think. Just to say, this final point here, this one underneath, actually has like sort of tabs and things like this, and not tabs, but groups that we can unfold and fold, and it feels to me a bit more like something I would find in Cinema 4D, where you actually have things that the titles mean something a bit more. So if I just drop this connect under here and enable it, this is doing something a little bit more different, because this is probably one I built a while ago while I was testing out this whole thing. But what this is actually doing is taking a value that's like the max size and then pushing those big blobs up so that we never get anything underneath. But anyway, it has an icon. So you could then, once you've saved it as an asset, it becomes available in the asset browser. It's searchable. So here it is. I can add an icon to it and then even add it into the interface, and then it becomes a tool that you can use. But yeah, still having some fun playing around with this. It's very frustrating still, and I think there will be more information coming out on this topic. But they're super powerful, and just those methods. And once you actually can get the geometry in, you can then work with it, and those methods that I've just demonstrated, I think are quite important because it sort of takes away some of the mystery. So let's just see how we can use this asset. So we've got our connected geo, pretty rough. Again, it goes underneath into here, and this is this version. I'm not sure. I've probably got an old one, but it still does the same sort of task of basically putting whatever you put it into it, it's going to make it more blobby and give you a bit more information to work with. So then this can go into a volume builder, and I'm just kind of going over this a little bit quicker because I've already talked about this in part one of my presentation. But we have the volume, the mesh in here. It's the volume builder is set to fog. And we're smoothing out the result and using a group field. We're using the group field so that we can then put in a whole load of other load of other fields in here to really refine the look of this. And the linear field really helps us to just give the cloud an impression of a kind of a flat base. And we can also adjust the size of this and just bring this up to maybe make smaller types of clouds or whatever. And then from there, what I did with this was export it as a VDB. And I still have the VDB, I think. So I'll just enable these. Let's just see what this looks like in Redshift. Because what we'd have at the moment, we have a couple of lights in the scene. It's very important to have a light. And the light must be contributing to the volume. So if we look at our contribution here, we have that set to 1. All lights do by default, by the way. And then we have a volume material. And that is applied to this volume builder here. So we'll just press play. And we see that we have a little cloud in the sky. I I've gone ahead with this one and sort of, I'm using the density. I'm using the volume builder in here, but I've just named it density. And that's the important thing to note here. This volume builder is called density because sometimes I'll want to keep this material and use it actually on a VDB, which is expecting, the grids are named after the channels. So with these, if we just enable these have a density channel. You can see at the bottom here. And so that is why the material is named as such, so that now the light can sort of be scattered around that grid. So now we can, you can build from one cloud a more complex looking one. That's, you just add that detail and complexity. Now, I think another thing to say is, let's just come back to our presentation here. So yeah, the sort of fluffy looking result that we get. Let's see if we can combine some of these and add even more detail. So yeah, I'm going to jump back in here. And this would now be taking something like this. Maybe we just take the asset that we built. Let's just do that. How are we on time? All right. So yeah, I've got a few minutes, so I can do that. We'll take the asset that we built. We can put this in the volume builder. And we can grab some fields that we're already using. I'll grab that group. In fact, yeah, I'll grab that group. Where are we? Paste this in and just drop this in. So you're getting to see the workflow. We set this to multiply. It needs to be objects below, so it references the geo there. Let me just see where these are. Oh, the linear field is removing everything, so let's just get rid of that and just see what's going on. Our volume size. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, so because I took away the linear field, and these blending modes are set to minimum, they're actually like, they're doing nothing here. So we need to at least set one to normal, or then the one on top is blending in that way. So, glad I spotted that. Let's just set this one to maybe multiply, so we can cut a little bit more out. And yeah, I'm just going into the field that we have here and just adjusting the noise, because I think the scale of this object, it may even be too large. What I like to do also is just put in a cube, and you can see this is huge. I think to simulate on top of this would require a lot of memory. So what I want to do is actually come in to my node mesh, right, and show another thing that we could do. At the end of all this, we could just say, right, I want to transform that geometry. So I want to make it smaller. So I'll just add another node, bring this in. And what we can do is just set the scale down, something a bit more manageable, maybe half. And so now let's just grab a cube and just see what that looks like. So from this view, it's probably about 5. Let's have a guess. Yeah, around about 5. It's not crazy big now, which is important, I think. So we've scaled that down, and we have something to play with Pyro. So we could drop a Pyro tag on here, and emit maybe from the volume. And let's just hide the volume builder, because we're still seeing that in the viewport. Again, we're going to turn off the temperature. So we want to see just the density shaded in the viewport. And let's just see what this is giving us. So a little bit of something is kind of there. We could then add a bit more energy to this by increasing the turbulence. All right. And while I've got the time, why not we'll cover adding maybe a matrix on this as well. So let's just say we'll take our matrix object, set it to object mode. We'll drop in the nodes mesh that we have here. And now we're getting some matrices on the surface of this. Let's just turn that off, and you'll be able to see. So they're on the scaled surface, I think, which is good. So we may need to connect that up just so it can see it properly. So I'm going to put this onto the connect. OK, well, that's fine. It's working all right. And we could say that there's actually some Pyro on here. This could be, I don't even know what this is going to look like, but we could say these are fuel sources. This could look terrible, but we could maybe not. And you'll now see that, whoa, there's a lot of extra energy going into this. So we could drop down the value here, and it's continuously emitting fuel and adding to this now. Yeah, that's really a lot. I think I'll just set it so that it's just at the beginning. And we'll see if it does anything. Still a lot. So I would probably want to dial down the temperature and stuff like that, just so it's not too crazy. Yeah, I think that's helping a bit. But yeah, wasn't part of the plan, but it just shows you that you can use matrices, matrix objects with Pyro now, which is cool. And so I think from here, you've got the sort of wispy look, and it really is a balancing act of and how much time you have just to combine these elements. You can keep building and building. And layering up the complexity. And we've seen as well that once you get to something that we like, we can then up-res that cache as well, even add more complexity from there. So yeah, I think we got through most of this, which is good. And if you want to speak to me, I'm around for another hour to talk about anything C4D or whatever. Yeah, here's a few renders that I've been playing with. And I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you so much for turning up. I really appreciate it. So.